Hi everyone, this is Kerim with SolarAcademy. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about why solar is becoming likely the best investment you will ever make in your life. And so let's get to it. Share my screen. So what you're seeing here is a standard 60-cell solar panel. Today in 2020, more than 2 million homes have similar solar panels on their roofs in the US and in many other places around the world. The cost for the solar panel today is $150. But if you go back a decade, right around the time when I entered the solar industry around 2010, the cost for a similar size panel was about 5 times higher, $750. And if you go back 4 decades, a similar size panel would have cost you 100 times more. The reason this the price of this panel is coming down like this is because the main ingredient or the main component in a solar panel, the silicon PV cells, have been going down in price dramatically over the years, almost 200 times over a time period of about 40 years to be exact. And like most electronics, components are getting cheaper as the industry gains scale and efficiency, and which is driving the adoption. This is how much solar installations around the globe have increased, almost 30 times over the last decade again. And given the amount of solar resource we have vis-a-vis all the other sources of energy, whether it's coal or oil or natural gas, solar will most definitely be a main ingredient of power infrastructure for the future. Just an interesting fact, the amount of sunshine that falls in the state of Texas in a single month contains more energy than all the oil that has ever been pumped out of the ground in Texas. And another really interesting fact is that a square mile of 100 mile by 100 mile area of solar panels would be enough to power all of the US electricity needs today. And something slightly bigger would be enough for the world, and about the same size would be enough for all of Europe. So here's how a solar panel works. As the sun shines on it every day, electrons flow out. And the cool thing is the sun shines pretty much consistently from year to year or even day to day. And no matter where you are in the US, you're going to get plus or minus 10, 20% the same amount of solar resource. Solar works on rainy days and cloudy days. And even when the snow lands on a solar panel, because the panel absorbs the heat from the sun, the snow melts pretty rapidly on the solar panel, whereas it might not be melting in other places as quickly. And as long as you live in a utility company district that has a agreement to buy your power, you'll be able to go solar pretty easily around the country. And so as the solar panel works, the electrons flow out. And again, depending on your utility company and your local electric rate, there is a value to that electricity that flows out. So let's look at that calculation of what that yield looks like for a solar panel. Like I said, this was a $150 solar panel. Solar panels today in the US on the low end cost about 50 cents a watt. It can go up higher if you go with well-known brands, but solar panels are becoming pretty much commodities these days. They're pretty low tech at this point, and they work for 30 to 40 years with no issues in most cases. So when the sun shines on it, and I'm going to go with a lower average of 4 hours of sunshine a day, which is definitely on the lower end of the spectrum. You're going to get, this panel is going to produce 1200 watt hours, 4 times 300, 1200 watt hours of electricity, or 1.2 kilowatt hours of electricity per day on average. And if you take that and apply it to the whole year, multiply it by 365, you're going to get about 438 kilowatt hours of electricity flow out of this panel. And the average electricity rate in the US today is around 13 cents. So you apply that 13 cents to 438 kilowatt hours, you're going to get about $57 of annual electricity production out of this single panel that costs you $150. So you're going to get a 38% cash on cash yield on this single panel. And going back to the cost of the panel, that is the cost today. And in another decade from now, very likely this panel is going to cost you about $50 or around there, and very likely that it's going to be around $30 or even less, possibly in another decade after that. So compared to, your traditional investment vehicles like treasury bills or bonds or corporate bonds or company stocks, which generally bring you something, from 3 to 10% in annual return, a solar panel is producing 38% of its value when you just lay it under the sun. Well, that sounds to be a little too good to be true, isn't it? And the answer to that is yes, it is too good to be true, because if you just lay a single solar panel, that's not going to be enough. When you're talking about a solar system, you generally get about 20 solar module panels in a solar system, which actually doesn't change the math. Just the more panels you have, the more electricity you'll produce, which is good. But the panels are not the only component. You also are going to need a inverter, a string inverter, or microinverters, generally one for each panel. And you're also going to need racks and mounts to attach the panels to your roof or somewhere near the house. And unfortunately, you're also going to have to pay additional fees in the form of labor, construction fees, design and engineering fees, interconnection fees to the grid, and so on. So that formula that we were looking at, which is a 38% cash on cash yield, almost a 3-year payback, is not going to look as great when you add all the other costs, because adding the inverters and the racks and the mounts and also the labor costs that go into a system will change this the denominator, the value of your asset, from like 50 cents a watt more like to at least $2 a watt, maybe even a little bit higher. So it's going to multiply your cost by 4, which means the return is going to go down by 4 times 2. So now all of a sudden your 38% return is looking more like a 9.5% return. 3-year, almost 2.5 to 2.7 year payback period is now looking like a 10-year payback period. But again, this is just assuming pretty average sunshine, actually a little bit lower than sunshine, therefore kind of on the low end production, and also the average price for electricity. Well, the thing is, in the US, there are highly varying prices of electricity, and this is a chart from more than 4 years ago, so the prices have come up even more. Today in California, we're averaging close to 20 cents, and if you live in a slightly larger home where you have slightly higher than average consumption, your price for electricity goes up in tiers, starts in the high teens, goes up to 30 some cents, or even 40 plus cents in many cases. So the average bill for a home can be more like 25 cents or more. And so going back to our formula, that 13 cents is a pretty average assumption. Many homes going solar in California spend 26 cents or more on average for electricity. So when you apply that to your cost, you're again at a 5-year payback, kind of almost 20% return on your investments. And in some places, whether you have like a really high levels of consumption, you can hit close to 50 cents, or if you live in places like Hawaii, where the local electricity price is again really high, you're gonna, you apply a 50 cents price to the electricity produced, again, you're down into 2.7, in the 30+% yield for your investments. So I think it's fair to assume at 26 cents for most solar going people these days, at least in the California area, and slightly lower in other parts of the country. And that's a 5-year payback. And this is before you apply the federal incentive tax. And some people might say this $2 per watt price is also a little bit on the low end, even though we do see some residential prices at that low end. Many of the California pricing is around $2.50 per watt. So I will assume that. The good thing is there's also, which I haven't really included in any of my previous formulas, there's also a 26% federal investment tax credit, which means you bring, whatever you're spending on your solar system, you're going to get 26% of its value in as a tax credit on your tax bill for the following year. That includes the labor cost as well as the solar system cost. So that simply gives you a less than 5-year payback yield in the low 20s, again, based on that scenario. So that concludes the very basics of why solar is likely going to be the best investment you will make over the next decade. Thank you.